Hi, everyone. This is, I guess, part 3 of the series of lectures on the French Revolution. Again, a lot of these are going to add way more detail than your textbook goes into, and probably way more detail than you really need to take notes on or anything like that. But it's to give you a better understanding of the series of events, especially that leads to and then leads through the French Revolution, to give you some sort of idea. I would also recommend using the podcast that I had sent out as an assignment, the Mike Duncan's Revolutions, for deeper understanding of any of these topics. Usually you can search just by the topic name, and you'll be able to come up with about a 20-minute podcast with additional information there. We need to start here with the Parlement. These various entities, you want to consider them like, I guess, clubs of the super elite who are officially recognizing the laws put forth by the king, something along those lines. These people are your upper class of the second estate. These are generational titles. These are generational groupings that are passed down. They are regional. There are 13 of them, and of them, the Paris Parlement is the most important to us as we move into the early stages of the French Rev. Essentially, these are there to provide kind of an official check on the monarchy. They have the ability, as any decree given by the king comes to each of the areas to be implemented or put into place, it's the Parlement who makes it official, who puts it on the books, and then is able to implement through a series of people any collection of something or to carry out any orders necessary. But any law has to be registered by the Parlement to take effect in those regions. The parlements, they are able to debate topics freely. They are able to issue remonstrances, those complaint lists, those hate lists about a particular thing that we saw with Charles I in England. And they really begin to embody their role, especially the one in Paris, the Paris Parlement, that they are feeling the will of the people, that they are providing a service to the people of France, that they are ensuring that the people of France's rights are not trampled upon by the monarchy. Really, I don't know that they care that much about those people. What they do care about is their own power within. And as we saw under Louis XIV, with absolutism, the nobles are going to try and be quieted in a variety of different ways, either placated, as we saw in Prussia, or given these kind of menial tasks where they want to grovel at the feet of the monarch, like we saw with Louis XIV moving to the Palace of Versailles. At any rate, these guys can send back any rules with those complaints, these remonstrances, back to the king and say, no, not good enough. Now, in theory, that's all well and good, but the king can issue what is known as a lit de justice. That's the last part that you're looking at there. And this lit de justice, now he's not getting lit, this is lit de justice. And the king has to come in person and basically override the sort of veto power that the Parlement has. Well, how does this all tie in? The Paris Parlement is gaining popularity amongst the Third Estate and especially within the bourgeoisie as being this beacon of Enlightenment thought within an absolutist environment. Again, that's not truly the case. But that's the role that the Parlement is depicting in an effort to get people on their side and against Louis XVI's rules, against his attempts at reform, against Turgot's attempts at reform. The king is trying to push these things through. He goes and is about to issue a lit de justice. He has to sit there and listen to the debate and the remonstrance. And the dude is sitting on this very, very comfy pillow. And much like you guys do at times during a long lecture, he passes out. He falls asleep. So if you're the Paris Parlement, already thinking that the king is not listening to the complaints and the will of the people, again, they're probably not using that terminology, but is not listening to the complaints of the Paris Parlement, now he falls asleep on you as you're trying to explain them to him. Not a good look for our guy, Louis XVI. These Parlement, again, are going to play a bigger role as we move forward here. You want to make sure that you're able to classify a lot of these factors in the beginning parts as political, economic, social, intellectual. That'll give you a lens through which to examine these different things. Try to put these different events as they happen into various categories. Obviously, some of them are going to overlap. Here's France now, though. They are declaring bankruptcy. They have like 400,000 livres left in the royal treasury. They can't borrow any more money. They have nothing left to give. There's a dude in charge by the name of Brienne, and the king is going to try and assert some of this royal power back, try and push through some of these reforms to ensure that France is able to continue under the current system. He goes all Dolores Umbridge on them. He issues decrees, educational decrees, saying that you can't meet any longer. The Paris Parlement is disbanded. They are banished. The Parlement of Dauphine is banished as well. Get rid of them. Trying to limit the amount of backtalk, trying to push these reforms through, trying in any way not to call the Estates General. But Brienne makes the determination. There's no way around it. And so once again, we come back to this concept of Jacques Necker. We see now during this time period the development of the Third Estate as agitators and taking a leadership role, willing to take an interest within politics. That's really the first time that this is going on. This bankruptcy is a big deal. And in fact, some people are so stuck on Jacques Necker's Compte Rendu that outlines French finance that they cannot possibly believe the words of Calonne or the words of Brienne that say we need to call the Estates General and issue new taxes. In addition to this, we talked about the climate in the Little Ice Age already. We see a big dip in 1770 when Turgot initially tries to enforce some of these new reforms, push them through. Then in 1783, there's a volcanic eruption on Iceland that clouds the atmosphere and changes the climate there. 1787, some of those market reforms are pushed through to try and free the grain trade, but again, people don't have any bread. They don't have money for other things like textiles. So now the textile workers are out of business. July 13th, 1788, there's a giant hailstorm. You cannot make this stuff up. Giant pieces of hail, softball-sized pieces of hail, are falling and wreck an entire region of crops within France. 1788 and 89, just in time for the coldest winters on record within France. So some of this is really bad luck as all of these things are happening, but they are compounding on top of one another. That brings us back to Jacques Necker. He's actually brought back, Louis doesn't want to do it. He wants to avoid it at all costs. He doesn't like the dude. But he brings Jacques Necker back, and Necker, the people are hopeful. They are celebrating in the streets. They think that Jacques Necker is going to be able to work his financial wizardry and be able to bring France back from the brink of ruin. But he can't. He really cannot. And he's going to do some things that, again, are starting to lead us down that path towards the French Revolution. But the people are so happy they're celebrating in the streets. And this is where things really start to come to a head, because these Third Estate people are jumping for joy and they're almost rioting. Well, how do you quell a riot? You send in the troops. So now the Third Estate is witnessing their boy, Jacques Necker, financial wizard, hero of Third Estate, gonna get bread on the table, being brought in, and their celebrations are met with troops from the monarchy. Again, not a good look for our guy Louis. Estates General. How do we got how we get here, but now how is it going to function? Well, the last Estates General was called 175 years ago. So King Louis XVI actually does a good thing here. He says, okay, let's open it up and talk about what this is going to look like. The way it used to look like, early 1600s, vote by order. How does this work? The First Estate gets together, they make their determination, they get one vote. The Second Estate gets their heads together, they make a determination, they get one vote. The Third Estate gets their heads together, they make a determination, one vote. Each of the three estates gets one vote total, majority carries the day. Great, all well and good. Who do you think is going to vote together? Yeah, First and Second Estate keep the status quo, keep them in charge, keep their taxes, keep their exemptions, right? Or is it going to be vote by head, where each person has one vote? Now, we're talking about having some flexibility within each estate. We're also talking about the Third Estate playing a larger role than ever before, because obviously the Third Estate has the largest population. So the next question that comes in is double the third. This becomes almost like a rallying cry for the bourgeoisie that are taking part from the Third Estate. Double the third, vote by head, that's what they want. Then comes the question of how they're elected. Are they going to be appointed by regional ministers in that hodgepodge of divisions that we saw earlier? Are they going to be elected by people? How does that work? Necker has a purpose in asking all of these questions and asking for people's opinions. He wants to drive a wedge between the Second Estate and the Third Estate. He wants the Third Estate to stop considering the Parlement a piece of power and a beacon of hope. He wants to get rid of that concept in the hopes that the First and Second Estate will revert back to their regular norms and will continue to vote with the monarchy, and the monarchy can kind of do its thing. That works, and it works a little bit too well. These regional provinces are going to start their own regional estates. These provincial estates are going to meet and determine who is going to be selected. Well, in Dauphine, we run into a whole mess of problems in terms of determining how that's going to work. But eventually, they all get on the same page, and those estates agree that they want to start to push some of these Enlightenment reforms. In Brittany, however, you have clashes between the Second and Third Estate in terms of their overall importance and how this selection is going to work. And so we're left under this cloud of dispute and confusion. Thanks, Jacques Necker. That brings us to the role of the Parlement. Remember, they fashioned themselves as speakers for the people, being able to speak up for the people of France. Well, now the people of France are rioting in the streets and celebrating and fighting against the Second Estate in Brittany. And the Parlement is just kind of slowly backing away from this whole idea that they are the voice for the people of France. They're starting to feel like, okay, we've gone a little bit too far here. Let's reel things back in, guys. Remember, you're still the Third Estate. That's not going to sit too well with people who looked at them as a beacon of hope. That brings us to the Second Assembly of Notables, much more conservative in part as a kind of backlash against those riotous uprisings. We see the educated elite take the stage. These are people coming from the upper crust of the Third Estate, the bourgeoisie. After now that clubs, people can talk together again, Umbridge's educational decrees are no longer there, we see the development of a group called the Society of 30. This is like a who's who of your educated bourgeoisie. The Marquis de Lafayette, the Marquis de Condorcet, the Comte de Mirabeau, ABCS, the dude who writes the What is the Third Estate. We have Talleyrand coming in. He's going to play a big role. But they're going to use the press to get this information out to other like-minded people. They are raised on the Enlightenment ideals, and they will use these in how they are judged as they go through. So we're ramping up for the Estates Generale. And we see this document, What is the Third Estate? And according to ABCS, what is the Third Estate? Everything. What has it hitherto been politically? Nothing. What do we want to be? Something. This is extremely inflammatory. The dude goes out of his way to call the First and Second Estates parasites of France, sucking the lifeblood out of the nation. This is a far cry from anything else that has been discussed before. These provincial estates are going to meet. We have that confusion. Necker ends up dividing them into 234 voting segments and says, here, that's how you elect who you're going to have. And they're going to issue these cahiers or cahiers, these dédoléances. This is something that you definitely need to know. This is like an opening up of a listing of grievances. Talk about the problems that you have with what's going on right now. Talk about those things and list them in this official format. Each of the estates is able to do this, and each of them is going to do so in a different way. For the first estate, it's going to be made up mostly of local priests. So they're going to talk about things of redistributing the tithe money in a much better fashion. The second estate is going to be mostly conservative, and we'll see why in a second. So they're going to want to kind of say, okay, for the most part in their cahier, they recognize that they have to give up some of those tax exemptions that they so enjoy, but they're not willing to go too far. Now, the third estate, which is made up mostly of peasantry, but the local cahiers say, okay, things like stable farm prices, stable grain prices, and things of that nature. But by the time we get to the actual Estates Generale, most of it is going to be made up of the bourgeoisie. So you're going to see a shift in these cahiers. And this is the nerd in me coming out. This is so cool. We have like 25,000 documents explicitly stating the problems that people had with France right before a revolution, right before a true revolution takes place. It's an incredible wealth of knowledge that is afforded to us through these cahiers. While all of this goes on, we have this riot in Paris due to this guy publishing an article, and we're seeing those riots, those third estates, again, forcing those more conservative elements within the Parlement to distance themselves from there. We'll pick this up with the actual estates in the next section.